one of Australia's best-known performers and the highest-paid woman in radio. This is Wendy Harmer's Australian Story. Graham Brown, Wendy's father. Well, when Wendy was born, to see her for the first time, she had virtually a huge mouth and a little button of a top lip which was fused to her nose. So it was a huge hole in the face, disastrous-looking thing. Margaret Wicks, Wendy's mother. Graham came in that night and he was pretty upset and he said, "I don't want you to see her. I've told the doctor you can't see her for 7 days." Graham, well, it was a shock. Margaret was 17 and I was 22 at the time, healthy, and we couldn't believe it. Margaret, well, finally Dr. Martin came in and he brought me in a textbook, and she was one of the most severe cases of bilateral cleft lip and palate that he'd seen. Graham, I had a fox terrier pup born with a cleft palate and I had to drown it. Wendy's condition was such that if she were not a human, she would have been put down. Oh, thank God we didn't. It was the last of our thoughts. We loved that kid just the same. Margaret, I looked at her and the first thing I thought was, "Oh, my poor little love, you're going to have such a hard road here and I don't know what to do." Graham, well, it was a hard love approach that we gave to Wendy. Wendy could be loved, but not mollycoddled. And so we said, well, she's got to be toughened up against the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. And that's the way we operated. We knew no better. And in fact, I doubt if a therapist could have devised a better scheme. Wendy. And there was this thing that my mother used to do too. When I come home from school and say, "Oh, the boys have been picking on me," she'd say, "I want you to go and stand in front of the mirror, and when you can find something to complain about, you come out here and tell me." Margaret. So she went off with a tear in her eye. She said, "I've got nothing to be sorry for." And I said, "Right." So then I sat her down and I said, "Darling, when you grow up and you have more operations," I said, "you will be just as beautiful as anyone else. It's just going to take time." 60 years later, my mother admits that lesson in front of the mirror was brutal. Chapter 1. The Dream Couple. My maternal grandparents, Ted Wicks and Rita, nee James, eloped to escape their family's disapproval. Rita's people were Protestant and had come to Tasmania from England in the 1850s, settling around Scottsdale. Ted's were Catholic and had made their home in Deloraine. The children of that era goaded each other with the chants, "Proddy dogs, sitting on logs, eating maggots out of frogs. Catholic dogs, stink like frogs, jumping out of hollow logs." This ancient religious enmity was to prove disastrous for the Wicks' daughter Margaret Elsie, and eventually for her eldest daughter me, Wendy Gay. My grandparents had 2 children together, Rex and then Margaret, but by 1940, when my mother was just 2 years old, they'd separated. Rita was banished to the mainland and lived in Melbourne. Divorced, a disgrace. Big brother Rex lived with the Catholic side of the family in Deloraine. Little sister Margie was sent to her Protestant grandparents in Longford. They lived just half an hour away from each other in central northern Tasmania, but rarely met. My mother's early days were mostly spent as an only child. As she recalls, one day a man wearing a tuxedo was at our house and I was told, "Margie, this is your father." He gave me a shilling. She remembers her grandparents as very, very strict, but kind enough to a little girl that they had no idea what to do with. They were from another era, almost Victorian in their outlook. Grandad James was the station master in Longford, and I can't quite picture his face, but I do remember the shiny buttons on his uniform. Nana James was a straight-laced, God-fearing woman. Mum was forbidden to make friends with any girls who had older brothers, and she remembers her grandmother as a distant figure, rather like the Queen. When Nana died, she appeared at the end of my bed wearing a wreath of white flowers and with the same sort of regal smile. She was calling, "Goodbye, Margie. Goodbye, Margie." Young Margie Wicks' days were routine, off to school early, on weekday afternoons working in the back vegetable garden until dark, on weekends the front flower garden. Her bedroom was off.